Verified incident logs. Authentic footage. Pure accountability. Welcome to Bodycam Incident Reports.
Turn around. Hands behind your back. I found cocaine.
You just pulled that from your vest. That's not mine.
Sure it isn't. You fit the profile.
I'm a federal agent. Check my back pocket. Now.
Save it for the judge, drug dealer.
You're committing a felony, and it's all on camera.
At 11:14 p.m. on a humid Tuesday night in August, a highly decorated federal agent lay handcuffed face down on the asphalt of a lonely state highway. A police officer with a history of complaints and a heart full of prejudice stood over him holding a bag of white powder he had just pulled from his own vest. In exactly 12 minutes, Officer Derek Vance would make a series of decisions that would not only destroy his life, but would ignite a firestorm across the entire country. He didn't know who he had stopped. He didn't know that the thug he was framing was actually leading a tri-state task force against the cartel. And he certainly didn't know that the dash cam of the Tesla parked behind them was capturing every single frame in 4K resolution. A man was fighting for air on the pavement. A corrupt officer was busy fabricating a felony, and a system built on trust was about to be shattered by the weight of one man's staggering arrogance. What happened in the next 12 minutes would expose a level of corruption that terrified investigators, prove that a badge does not grant immunity from morality, and demonstrate that the most dangerous criminal at a crime scene is sometimes the one wearing a uniform. Before we dive into this story, do me a favor. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you believe that nobody is above the law, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. What this officer did, and the shocking way he was exposed, is a story you need to hear. Marcus Thorne was not a man who sought attention. At 38 years old, he was a ghost. While most people his age were posting their lives on Instagram or climbing the corporate ladder in glass offices, Marcus operated in the shadows. He was a senior special agent with the DEA assigned to the Special Operations Division. He didn't just work cases, he dismantled empires. Marcus held a dual degree in criminology and law from Georgetown University. He was a former Marine Corps scout sniper who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before trading his camouflage for a suit and a badge. In his 14-year career with the DEA, he had been instrumental in seizing over $40 million in illicit narcotics and assets. He spoke fluent Spanish and Portuguese. He had gone undercover in organizations so dangerous that a single slip-up would have meant a torture video sent to his family. His colleagues didn't call him a miracle worker. They called him the architect. He built cases that were bulletproof. He was methodical, brilliant, and fiercely patriotic. He believed in the law with a reverence that borders on religious. But on this particular Tuesday, Marcus wasn't the architect. He wasn't a federal agent. He was just a black man driving a brand new Mercedes S-Class through a county known for its speed traps and its good old boy politics. He was returning from a classified debriefing in Atlanta, heading home to his wife and 2 daughters. He was wearing a casual designer tracksuit comfortable for the long drive and a baseball cap. His badge and service weapon, a Glock 19, were secured in a lockbox in the trunk, per protocol for a long personal transit, but his agency credentials, his pocket commission, were in his back pocket. He was tired. He was listening to a podcast. He was driving exactly 2 miles over the speed limit. The stretch of highway he was on Route 41 cut through a jurisdiction patrolled by Officer Derek Vance. Derek Vance was a 15-year veteran of the force. White male, 42 years old, heavy-set with a buzz cut that hadn't changed since 1998. Vance viewed himself as the sheepdog, protecting the flock from the wolves. But in reality, Vance was the wolf. He had 18 citizen complaints in his file. Excessive force, racial profiling, unlawful search. Every single one had been dismissed as unfounded or within policy by a department that prioritized protecting its own over protecting the public. Vance didn't see individuals. He saw stereotypes. He believed he had an instinct for spotting criminals. He called it the sixth sense. The courts would later call it systemic racial bias. Vance sat in his cruiser radar gun off watching cars pass. He wasn't looking for speeders. He was looking for suspects. When he saw the black Mercedes with tinted windows and out-of-state plates driven by a black male wearing a tracksuit and a backward cap, Vance didn't see a federal agent on his way home. He saw a drug courier. He saw a payday. He saw a target. He pulled out onto the highway and hit the lights. Marcus saw the lights in his rearview mirror. He sighed, checked his speedometer 67 in a 65, and pulled over safely to the wide shoulder. He knew the drill. He turned on the interior lights, rolled down all the windows, and placed his hands clearly on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 positions. Force of habit. 14 years in law enforcement meant you knew how jumpy cops could be. He prepared to identify himself immediately. Officer Vance approached the passenger side first flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, scanning the interior. He saw the leather seats, the expensive dashboard, the empty passenger seat. Then he circled to the driver's side. "License and registration." Vance said no greeting. His hand was resting on his holstered weapon. "Good evening, officer." Marcus said, his voice calm, trained. "I have my license in my wallet in the center console. I also want to inform you immediately that I am a federal agent with the DEA. My credentials are in my back pocket. My service weapon is secured in the trunk lockbox." Vance paused. He shined the light directly into Marcus's eyes, blinding him. "Federal agent, huh?" Vance sneered. "Let me guess. You're undercover, or maybe you just bought a badge online." "I am a senior special agent officer. If you let me reach for my credentials—" Marcus began, but Vance cut him off. "Don't you move your hands." Vance barked, his hand tightening on his gun. "I smell marijuana coming from the vehicle. Step out of the car." Marcus froze. He knew with absolute certainty that there was no marijuana in the car. He had never smoked a day in his life. He passed random drug tests monthly. The smell of marijuana was the oldest lie in the book, a manufactured probable cause to bypass the Fourth Amendment. "Officer, there is no marijuana in this vehicle. I am willing to exit, but I am telling you again you are making a profiling stop on a federal officer. Get out now!" Vance opened the door and grabbed Marcus by the arm, yanking him out. Marcus didn't resist physically, but he kept his verbal command presence. I am complying, but you are violating procedure." Vance spun Marcus around and slammed him against the side of the Mercedes. He kicked Marcus's legs apart. "Spread 'em. You got any needles on you? Any crack pipes?" "I am a DEA agent," Marcus repeated, speaking clearly for the body camera he hoped was recording. "Check my back pocket. My commission book is right there." Vance ignored the pocket. He patted Marcus down roughly, intentionally hitting sensitive areas. He found nothing but a cell phone and a wallet. He pulled the wallet out, glanced at the driver's license, and tossed it on the hood. He didn't check the back pocket where the federal credentials were. He didn't want to see them. They would ruin his narrative. "Stay here. Don't move," Vance ordered. He moved to the open driver's door and began to toss the car. He ripped out the center console contents. He threw papers on the floor. He opened the glove box and dumped it. Marcus watched from the side of the road. "Officer, you do not have consent to search. You have not established probable cause. The smell of marijuana is a fabrication." "I decide what's probable cause, boy," Vance shouted back from inside the car. Vance was getting frustrated. He expected to find a stash quickly. A car this nice, a guy looking like that there had to be drugs. But there was nothing. The car was clean. This was the moment Officer Cole Turner made the decision that would end his life as he knew it. He couldn't go back empty-handed. He had already called in a suspicious vehicle stop and implied he had a big bust. His ego was on the line. Vance reached into his own tactical vest. In a small hidden pocket he kept a drop bag, a small sandwich bag filled with baking soda and methamphetamine residue. It was his insurance policy for when he knew someone was guilty but couldn't prove it. Vance leaned entirely into the car, obscuring his body camera with the door frame, or so he thought. With a quick sleight of hand, he dropped the baggie under the driver's seat, then immediately found it. "Bingo!" Vance yelled. He backed out of the car, holding the baggie up in the air. I knew it, cocaine. Looks like intent to distribute. Marcus stared at him in disbelief. You just planted that. I saw you reach into your vest. You're a liar and a junkie. Vance walked over, grabbing his handcuffs. Turn around. You are making a catastrophic mistake, Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, deadly serious. I am a federal agent. You just committed a felony on camera. The only felony here is yours, drug dealer. Vance grabbed Marcus's wrist and twisted it violently, forcing his arm high up his back, far past the point of resistance. Quick question for you watching. Have you ever been accused of something you didn't do by someone who refused to listen to the truth? Type yes or no in the comments. As Vance slammed the cuffs on, he shoved Marcus forward. Marcus's head collided with the B-pillar of the car hard. A sickening crack echoed on the quiet highway. Marcus's knees buckled. He wasn't just in pain, he was in trouble. The impact had caused a sudden massive spike in his blood pressure. Marcus had a controlled condition, manageable hypertension, but the physical trauma combined with the extreme stress triggered a vagal response. He slumped against the car, sliding down to the asphalt. His vision blurred. A ringing filled his ears. Get up. Vance kicked at his leg. Stop faking. You guys always play the victim. My head, Marcus slurred. Dizzy. Need medical. You need a cell, that's what you need. You're high, probably dipped into your own supply. It was at this moment that a silver Honda Civic slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder about 30 feet behind the cruiser. The driver was Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was a 29-year-old flight nurse for the University Medical Center. She spent her days in a helicopter keeping trauma victims alive at 2,000 feet. She knew what distress looked like. She had seen the officer slam the man's head into the car. She saw the man crumble. She put her car in park, turned on her hazards, and stepped out. She was wearing her flight suit, blue Nomex with "Flight Nurse" embroidered in gold on the back and chest. "Officer, is everything okay?" Sarah called out, keeping her hands visible. Vance spun around, hand dropping to his holster. "Get back in your vehicle. This is an active crime scene." Sarah didn't retreat. She walked closer, eyes locked on Marcus, who was now twitching slightly on the ground, his breathing ragged. "I'm a trauma nurse, officer. I saw that impact. That man looks like he's going into neurogenic shock. He needs assessment." "He's a drug dealer who's high on coke," Vance spat. "He's faking it to get out of a ride. Back off or I'll arrest you for interference." Sarah stopped at the front of her car. She looked at Marcus. She saw the classic signs that Vance was ignoring: the pallor, the diaphoresis, the irregular respirations. "Officer, look at his skin color. He's gray. He's not faking. If he has a subdural hematoma from hitting the car, he could die in minutes. I can do a quick pupil check." "I said back off!" Vance screamed, losing control. He felt the situation slipping. He had a criminal on the ground, a busybody interfering, and a lie to maintain. "You are interfering with a police investigation. I am trying to prevent a death in custody," Sarah shouted back, her voice shaking but firm. "I am a licensed medical professional. You have a duty to render aid. If you deny him care and he dies, that is murder." "He's not dying. He's a junkie." "I am not a junkie." Marcus gasped from the ground, his voice barely a whisper. "Federal agent, pocket." Sarah heard him. Vance pretended he didn't. "He's saying he's a federal agent," Sarah yelled. "Officer, check his ID. What if he's telling the truth? He's lying. They all lie." Vance marched over to Sarah, leaving Marcus unattended. "Last warning, get in your car and drive away or you go to jail tonight." Sarah looked at the handcuffs on Vance's belt. She looked at Marcus, who was now beginning to seize a focal seizure caused by the head trauma. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling 911. I'm requesting a supervisor and an ambulance." "You put that phone away." Vance reached for her. Touch me and you'll regret it, Sarah said, stepping back and hitting dial. I am a witness. I am recording this. And I am calling your sergeant. Vance froze. He realized he was crossing a line he couldn't uncross, arresting a flight nurse on the side of the highway while a man seized on the ground. That was too much even for him. He turned back to Marcus. Marcus was shaking violently. Foam was gathering at the corners of his mouth. Damn it, Vance muttered. He walked back to Marcus. Hey, quit it, wake up. He kicked Marcus's foot again. No response. Vance looked at the baggie of powder he had found. Then he looked at the man. Doubt started to creep in. Not moral doubt, Vance didn't have that, but fear for his own skin. Dispatch Unit 4 Alpha, Vance radioed, his voice tight. Send EMS. Suspect is having some kind of reaction. Possible overdose. He's not overdosing, Sarah yelled from behind her phone. He has head trauma. Tell them it's a trauma alert. Vance ignored her. He leaned down and grabbed Marcus by the collar, hauling him up to a sitting position, the worst possible thing to do for a spinal or head injury. Check my pocket. Marcus groaned, his eyes rolling back. Vance finally decided to look. Not to help, but to find a name to run for warrants. He reached into the back pocket Marcus had been screaming about. He pulled out a black leather wallet with a gold badge embedded in the front. The blood drained from Vance's face. It wasn't a fake badge. It wasn't a security guard badge. It was the heavy, authoritative shield of the United States Department of Justice. Below it, a laminated ID card. Special Agent Marcus J. Thorne, Drug Enforcement Administration. Vance stared at the ID. He looked at the drug dealer he had just assaulted. He looked at the baggie of baking soda he had planted. He felt a cold pit open in his stomach. He hadn't just framed a citizen. He had framed a Fed. The sirens of the ambulance and the backup cruisers were audible in the distance now. Vance looked at Sarah, who was still filming. He's a cop, Vance whispered, mostly to himself. He is a federal agent, Sarah corrected, lowering her phone slightly but keeping the lens focused. And you just assaulted him. The next 30 minutes were a blur of chaos that dismantled Vance's career in real time. The ambulance arrived first. The paramedics pushed past a stunned Vance. Sarah briefed them immediately. Blunt force trauma to the left temporal lobe, possible seizure history of hypertension reported by patient before loss of consciousness. While the medics worked on Marcus, a black SUV with government plates screeched to a halt behind the police cruisers. 2 men in suits with DEA windbreakers jumped out. They didn't look happy. Marcus had been on the phone with his partner, Agent David Ross, just minutes before the stop. When the line went dead and Marcus didn't call back, Ross tracked his phone. He had heard the beginning of the altercation. Ross walked straight up to Vance. "Where is Agent Thorne?" Vance couldn't speak. He pointed to the ambulance. "Who are you?" Vance's sergeant, who had just arrived, stepped in. "I'm Assistant Special Agent in Charge, David Ross, DEA. That man in the ambulance is one of my senior agents. Why is he in handcuffs?" The sergeant looked at Vance. "Vance, what happened?" I stopped him for speeding," Vance stammered. "He resisted. I found drugs." "Drugs?" Ross laughed, a cold, terrifying sound. "Marcus Thorne doesn't even drink coffee. If you found drugs on him, you put them there." The sergeant looked at Vance. He saw the sweat. He saw the shaking hands. He saw the baggie sitting on the hood of the cruiser, a sloppy amateur plant. "Uncuff him," the sergeant ordered. "Now." Vance walked to the stretcher where Marcus was being loaded. I have to take the cuffs off." Marcus opened his eyes. He was groggy, concussed, but lucid. He looked Vance dead in the eye. "You better lawyer up," Marcus whispered. "I'm going to take your badge. I'm going to take your pension. And then I'm going to take your freedom." Vance unlocked the cuffs. His hands were trembling so badly he dropped the key twice. Most people who face a corrupt cop have no recourse. It's their word against the officers. The blue wall of silence closes ranks. The report is written to justify the force. The victim takes a plea deal to avoid prison. But Marcus Thorne was not most people. By the next morning, the U.S. Attorney's Office was involved. The FBI Civil Rights Division opened an immediate investigation. Vance wrote his report that night. He lied. He wrote that Marcus had lunged at him. He wrote that the drugs were found in plain view. He wrote that Marcus was screaming obscenities. He didn't know about the Tesla. Marcus's car was equipped with Sentry mode and a forward-facing 4K dashcam. When the FBI pulled the footage, it didn't just contradict Vance's report, it obliterated it. The video clearly showed Vance's sleight of hand. It showed him reaching into his vest. It showed the drop. It showed the planting. But even more damning was the audio. It captured the racial slurs Vance muttered under his breath. It captured his refusal to look at the credentials. It captured Sarah the nurse begging to provide medical aid and being threatened with arrest. The drug test came back from the lab 100% sodium bicarbonate. Baking soda. Vance hadn't just made a bad arrest. He had committed deprivation of rights under color of law, a federal crime. He had filed a false police report. He had committed perjury. He had assaulted a federal officer. The fallout was swift and brutal. 3 days later, the police chief held a press conference. He looked tired. He announced that Officer Derek Vance had been fired effective immediately, but that wasn't the headline. The headline was the man standing next to the chief, the United States Attorney for the district. This morning, the U.S. Attorney announced grand jury indictments were returned charging Derek Vance with civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, and falsifying records in a federal investigation. We are also reviewing 45 previous arrests made by Mr. Vance. Vance was arrested at his home. He walked out in handcuffs the same way he had forced so many others to walk. He didn't look like a warrior cop anymore. He looked like a scared middle-aged man who had finally run out of lies. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Vance's defense was that he made an honest mistake and that he feared for his life. The jury didn't buy it. The video evidence was overwhelming. The testimony of Sarah Jenkins, the nurse, was devastating. She described a man so blinded by power and prejudice that he was willing to let a human being die rather than admit he was wrong. Marcus Thorne testified in his dress uniform. He spoke calmly. He described the fear not for himself, but for every young black man who crossed paths with Vance and didn't have a badge to save them. "I survived because I am a federal agent," Marcus told the jury. "But if I had been a teacher, a mechanic, or a student, I would be in prison right now, or I would be dead." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Derek Vance was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The judge, in a scathing sentencing statement, said, "You used the badge as a shield for your bigotry and a weapon for your ego. You are the very definition of tyranny." The city settled a civil lawsuit with Marcus Thorne for $4.5 million. Marcus donated a significant portion of it to a legal defense fund for victims of police misconduct. But the real change was in the policy. The department implemented the duty to intervene policy, mandating that officers stop their colleagues from committing misconduct. They required body cameras to be active the moment a vehicle stop is initiated with severe penalties for muting. They also reviewed Vance's past cases. 7 men who had been imprisoned on Vance's testimony were exonerated and released. 7 lives stolen by a liar with a badge were finally returned. Sarah Jenkins, the nurse, received a civilian commendation for bravery. She and Marcus remain friends. Marcus recovered from his concussion, though he still suffers from occasional migraines. He returned to duty, but he changed his focus. He now teaches ethics and constitutional policing at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. He teaches young agents that their power is a loan from the public, not a right. Let's talk about the bigger picture here. This story isn't just about a corrupt cop and a federal agent. It's about the fragility of freedom. Officer Vance saw a black man in a nice car and decided he was a criminal. He wrote the story in his head before he even turned on his lights. He was so committed to that story that he ignored reality. He ignored the law. He ignored a medical emergency. Prejudice is a blinder. It narrows your vision until all you see is what you want to see. Vance wanted to see a thug, so he missed the federal agent. He wanted to be a hero, so he became a villain. But the most terrifying part, Vance almost got away with it. If Marcus hadn't been a Fed, if Sarah hadn't stopped, if the Tesla hadn't been recording, Vance would still be on the street tonight. How many Vances are out there? How many people are sitting in prison right now because they didn't have a badge in their back pocket? This story teaches us a valuable lesson about power. Power without accountability is poison. It corrupts the holder and destroys the subject. But it also teaches us the power of the witness. Sarah didn't have a weapon. She had a phone and a voice. And that was enough to start the avalanche of justice. If you saw an officer breaking the law, would you have the courage to pull over and record knowing the risk? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments below. This is the story of how a racist cop tried to frame the wrong man and found out that justice has a way of catching up to you. It's a reminder that the truth doesn't care about your badge, your tenure, or your assumptions. Thanks for watching this story all the way through. If you found this eye-opening, make sure you're subscribed because I cover more stories like this that need to be told. See you in the next one.
The incident review concludes here. To support continued transparency, kindly like and subscribe. We appreciate you watching Bodycam Incident Reports.